Welcome to Idaho Fish and Game's Hook and Bulletin podcast, your weekly news roundup of hunting, fishing, trapping, and conservation stories from around the Gem State. Hosted by Fish and Game's Public Information Specialist, Connor J. Lease.
And welcome, everyone, to the very first episode of Idaho Fish and Game's Hook and Bulletin podcast. It's been a heavy week for hunting, fishing, trapping, and conservation stories here in Idaho. This week on the Hook and Bulletin, we'll be talking about Kokanee, changes to this year's antlerless mule deer and antelope hunts, and the annual Fish and Game fur auction. But first, the numbers are in, ladies and gentlemen, and here's how the 2023 deer and elk hunting season stacked up. It didn't take a whole lot of rubbing the crystal ball to forecast a less than stellar mule deer harvest in 2023 because of the severe winter that preceded it. And with last fall's harvest stats now available, that story can finally be told. Starting with elk. Ironically, it may have been the opposite weather that contributed to the lowest elk harvest since 2013. Warm fall weather with little precipitation often creates poor hunting conditions, but whether or not, The statewide elk harvest dropped nearly 2,400 animals compared to the prior year. It was a good run. 2023 would have been the 10th year in a row for elk harvest to eclipse the 20,000 mark, but that's not how last fall played out. Elk hunters took home 18,568 elk in 2023, roughly an 11% drop in animals harvested compared to 2022. Roughly 87,864 elk hunters, less than 1% fewer than 2022, took to the mountains last fall in search of elk, with 21% of those hunters successfully harvesting an elk. To no one's surprise, mule deer hunting saw a big decline in 2023. A total of 74,503 mule deer hunters hunted last fall, with nearly 25% of those successfully packing out a mule deer. Last year's roughly 22% decrease in total mule deer harvest is also the 7th consecutive year below the 10-year average. While it may seem impossible to have 70% of the years below the 10-year average, it's actually a reflection of an unusually large mule deer harvest in 2015 and 16 that drove up the 10-year average. Finally, on to whitetails. Whitetail deer harvest has been at the top of bad news headlines in recent years due to large disease outbreaks. However, in 2023, the number of whitetails harvested showed a bump in the right direction, from 19,182 in 2022 to 19,828 in 2023, which hopefully reflects recovering whitetail herds. Last fall's whitetail harvest also eclipsed the mule deer harvest for only the 6th time since 1975, when Fish and Game began tracking deer harvest by species. That's all just an overview, though. If you want to take a deeper dive into the numbers from last fall, head on over to our website and check out my story from March 25th. Oh, and a final note. April and May are right around the corner, and even as the snow melts and hills begin turning all green, Idaho's deer are still feeling the effects from previous winter conditions and its effect on their bodies. Deer go into the winter with their groceries on their back in the form of fat, and the less they are stressed and pushed around on their winter ranges, even right now, in early spring, goes a long way in helping their survival. All right. Enough about ungulates for now. Let's see how the Kokanee are doing. Kokanee salmon are prized by Idaho anglers. In good years, stocking and management by Fish and Game, along with good environmental conditions, can create banner Kokanee fishing. But within a few years, those same fisheries can turn belly up, which can be confusing and frustrating for anglers and fisheries managers because they value stable, reliable fishing. Fish and Game biologists are constantly working with anglers to provide good Kokanee fishing within the limitations of the fish's life cycle and the environmental conditions that drive them. Quote, Idaho traditionally has good Kokanee fishing, and we expect that to continue in the future, said Joe Kozovska, Fish and Game state fish manager. Quote, we're also facing some challenges that we want anglers to understand, so they have realistic expectations about what we can provide, end quote. Kokanee are notoriously challenging to manage wherever they swim, but the factors for fluctuating populations are generally the same in Idaho, including stocking numbers, young fish survival, food production, and predators. Unfortunately, there's rarely a one-size-fits-all management approach for a successful kokanee fishery because each body of water has its own personality, kind of like kokanee anglers themselves. Quote, "We don't want to give anglers the impression that we're making excuses and everything is in Mother Nature's hands," Kozovska said. Quote, "Our fisheries managers have produced many, many successful years of kokanee fishing," end quote. And anglers have to be realistic with their expectations. There is no magic formula for great kokanee fishing, and that amazing summer you had catching lots of big kokanee may have actually been a warning sign that the population was headed in the wrong direction. So yes, we'd all love to have lots of big kokanee every year, but that's not how cyclical kokanee populations function. For the full kokanee report, check out Roger Phillips' story on our website. Okay, moving on to Chinook salmon seasons. During its March commission meeting, the Idaho Fish and Game Commission set the spring Chinook seasons to open on April 27th in the Clearwater, Snake, and Salmon River drainages. And for the first time, some anglers will have the chance to tag their fish electronically through Fish and Game's mobile app. I'm not going to go through the individual Chinook seasons here, but you can check them out online. But what about this electronic tag thing? So, starting April 1st, Idaho Fish and Game is offering electronic salmon and steelhead permits to allow e-tagging of harvested salmon and steelhead through the Go Outdoors Idaho mobile app. And no, this is not an April Fool's Day prank. E-tagging will allow salmon or steelhead anglers to quote-unquote notch their permits electronically. Anglers can use the app while out of cell service, in low service areas, and while the device is on airplane mode. E-tagging will be optional when you buy your permits, and paper tags will still be available for those who prefer the traditional method of tagging fish. There is no additional cost for e-tagging, and anglers who already have a 2024 paper tag are ineligible for e-tags until 2025. Once an angler electronically tags a fish and clicks Submit, they receive a confirmation number for each fish that was e-tagged, and the record is fully submitted after they are back in self-service. There will be more information coming out soon, so be sure to check back to Fish and Game's website next week, or head on over to Fish and Game's e-tagging webpage to learn more. Link in the description. Alright, back to ungulates. Also coming out of last week's commission meeting, the decision to cut several antlerless deer and pronghorn hunts in eastern Idaho was approved. Remember back to May of 2023 when the commission cut deer and pronghorn controlled hunt tags due to last year's brutal winter that rocked the southeast and upper Snake regions. The same principle applies here. Fish and Game recognizes the sensitivity of antlerless mule deer hunts and have also heard concerns from hunters. Remember, it takes a series of mild winters, not just one, like the one we've been having this year. Fish and Game's decision to again change over a dozen hunts aims to give East Idaho's mule deer and pronghorn populations more recovery time. A list of those modified or removed hunts can be found online. Hit the link in the description to learn more. With that, it's time for the Rapid Fire Bulletin. The annual Lake Pend Oreille State of the Lake meeting is coming up on April 4th at the Pend Oreille Events Center, located at 401 Bonner Way in Pend Oreille. Say that 5 times really fast. Fisheries staff from the Panhandle region will share updates on the Lake Pend Oreille fishery and some of the activities they got planned coming up this year. There will also be a Q&A session. No registration is required, just come on out and participate. The meeting starts at 6 p.m. Pacific Time. In case you missed it, Idaho Fish and Game's most recent commission meeting, which was held last week on the 20th, is now available on YouTube and on our website. Idaho Fish and Game's annual fur auction will be held April 8th through the 22nd, which will be solely online. There will be no in-person viewing of items. Instead, buyers can preview photos of the auction items on Wares Auctioneering West's website. Attention all you Dvorak anglers. Fish and Game biologists have put together a comprehensive fishing forecast that outlines how the kokanee, smallmouth bass, and rainbow trout fishing is shaping up this year. It's a super interesting and informative read. Head on over to our website and read Eli Feld's story if you want to hear more about Dvorak. And last but not least, Idaho Fish and Game's Upper Snake region is working with the Bureau of Land Management to conduct some prescribed burns across a large portion of the Market Lake Wildlife Management Area. This is good news for both waterfowl and waterfowl hunters alike. Fires make the wetland more productive, allowing more openings for waterfowl and providing them with access to annual wetland plants, submerged vegetation, and aquatic invertebrates for foraging. Waterfowl hunters will also benefit from improved access into areas that were previously inaccessible prior to the burn. The prescribed burns are slated to take place over a few days sometime between March 25th and April 12th. Okay, that's it for this week's stories. It's time for our question of the week. We already chatted a little bit about e-tagging, but here's a good one as it relates to other species. Is e-tagging available for other animals, like deer or elk? The answer is no, not at this current time. Salmon and steelhead permits were selected for a pilot project to see if e-tagging is a viable option for fish and game license holders. If successful, the e-tagging program may be extended to other species down the line. That's all the news we have for this week. Thanks so much for putting an ear to Idaho Fish and Game's very first Hook and Bulletin podcast. If there's something on your mind or if you got a question related to fish and game matters, feel free to drop us a line at podcast@idfg.idaho.gov. Again, that's podcast@idfg.idaho.gov. Thank you so much for listening, folks. We'll catch you next week.